What is up, world? It's your boy Ton, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. Well, let's take it back a little bit before you were a badass real estate guru. This was in the fire days, right? So let's lighten it up. Or let's say, give us the craziest fire story, or even the funniest one would be great too.
Oh boy. Um, we had a gentleman who, I'll go with a medical one, just a funny medical one. There's a lot of tragedy, of course. We'll go with funny. So we got a guy on Interstate 5. Interstate 5 is, like I said, a major corridor, right? He was heading into Washington right for the bridge, and he crashed his scooter. This gentleman was in his 70s. And we're like, okay, so we're treating him for trauma because he laid his scooter down in the middle of crazy traffic, which is real busy coming out of Portland, Oregon into Washington State. He, um, I'm cracking myself up. I haven't thought about this story for a while. So he's got a fever. He's sick, really sick. And we're like, okay, we're doing vitals. We're asking a question. And he goes, oh, yeah, I've got a bad infection. So, so we're like, what's going on? So he kind of points down to his pants. And so we get him to like in on the gurney and we're checking him stuff. And he goes, yeah, I just, you look and he goes, yeah, I just got this Prince Albert, which I don't know if you know what the heck that is. I didn't know what it was. So he got his testicles. He got a big piercing, a big old, like a bull ring in his scrotum that's underneath, and it's all inflamed and swollen, and just it's like, oh my gosh, this guy is in his 70s. He's heading on his scooter on Interstate 5, burning up from a fever. He's totally infected, and he's going to see his girlfriend.
Oh Lord!
And we're kind of trying to process this whole thing as this unwinding and traffic's going by, and this, I mean, it's just like, oh my, get this guy to the hospital. I mean, this guy's gonna probably need antibiotics and maybe surgery. I don't know, but yeah, it was pretty funny. So
I thought it
that's
was like
in the life.
at first when you said Prince Albert, I was like a tattoo or something. Is this some like famous dude, or what the hell is going on here?
Big
But
old ring. You couldn't even see it. It was so swollen. Everything was like it looked like bowling balls. It was so
oh my goodness! Yeah,
and he's
first time I've
burning
ever
up
heard of
with a
that.
fever on a scooter. He's on like I don't even remember, it was like a 90cc or 100cc scooter in the middle of Interstate 5 in his 70s, crashes it, doesn't get killed. I don't know how he didn't get run over.
Jeez.
Yep, that's a day in the life of a firefighter.
I've heard of Jacob's ladders, but never Prince Albert. Now I've added one to my repertoire here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I figured only for you, Tan, that I could bring that story out.
That's a good one. That's a good one. But the crazy thing is, he's about to go see his girlfriend.
On his way to see his girl. I have a feeling he has many.
Like, what do you
Honest,
do in that situation?
that was the thing. We were pretty. It was a pretty good group of guys that I worked with for years, and we were just, we just were dying. It was so funny. You get back in the rig, and you have to keep your game face on when you're treating this guy and go, what's going on? Because you have to check him all over because of, he had road rash from the wreck. But then you see this, and you're like, holy moly, elephantitis.
Yeah, no shit.
I
Well,
apologize to anybody who I offended today.
oh, who gives a shit? Well, for those who don't know, Doc and I are in the same commercial mastermind, right? And I was actually up north looking at a property, trying to prep it for a fire inspection. And I just sent out a message to the group. I was like, hey, I don't know shit about what's about to go on. How do I prep this so that we don't fail? We obviously don't want to be on the firehouse's naughty list, right? So Doc answered, and he was walking me through all this shit, and like I'm taking notes on my phone while we're on the phone talking, and so my point is, I didn't know what the hell was going on. All I knew were fire extinguishers Little did I know there's a whole myriad of other shit when it comes to fire inspections, right? So the point for the rest of this episode is for everyone to learn from my mistakes, not have to phone a friend in need, and kind of get the gist of what goes on like during a fire inspection. So Doc, you know, I guess to start out with, prior to a fire inspection or during a fire inspection, what what are the most common fire code violations that you see, and what should landlords and property owners and even tenants, what should they be on the lookout for or expect during something like this?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I neglected to say I retired out of the fire marshal's office. So I was a senior inspector, which is kind of like it's captain's ranks. Um, give some background. Number one thing is make sure that we can find you. So make sure you have good addressing. Make it idiot proof, big. So if you do have an emergency at your facility, you have 123 Main Street, clearly 123 numbers on it that people can see it. Usually when I would start an inspection, you start from the front, and I used to go all the way through the building and out the back. But there's the number one thing is life safety, which is pretty obvious, but make sure that everybody can get out of your buildings. And what that means is don't be cute with when you're doing like fencing or locks. If you do any locks that you can come and attach with a drill driver, DeWalt, come in and you can add. Um, don't add anything like that. Don't add any slide bolts, that go, because people can put padlocks on them. Don't put any kind of a lock that requires a lock to lock it from the inside. So if you're looking, I don't care about anybody getting in. I mean, you can make it as bulletproof as you want, but getting out needs to work 24/7. You cannot lock somebody inside. So always make sure that when you're standing on the inside of your building looking at the door to go out, you can go out at any time. Doesn't matter. May make an alarm or whatever, that's fine, but don't make it that somebody can't get out of their own building. And I found a lot of that because people are so worried about security, they're thinking of people not getting in, but what they're not realizing is they're preventing their tenants, employees, whatever, from getting out. But worse, if they set something up and a firefighter's in there and they get in trouble and they can't get out of that building because of something you set, there's a tremendous amount of liability with that. So always make sure that folks can get out of any space at any time. That's
So
that's the biggest one.
on the liability perspective there, does insurance cover something like that, or are you royally fucked?
I think you're criminally liable
Shit, okay.
because and I'm not, even though I had the authority, I wasn't a well we had fire investigators who were also sworn police officers. So, but there's just, even if you're not criminally liable, you're civilly liable. Somebody's, because you can't, it's hard to defend. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
Mr. Dawkins, why did you put that lock on there? Did
Well,
you, what do you say, right?
yeah,
So
I have no
there
idea.
was a lot of that, and guys would look at me and be like, "Oh, gee, Christmas! I never even thought of it," because you're not thinking about, especially you're not thinking about first responders coming in and
Sure.
getting in
Yeah.
trouble.
That's probably one of the last things you're thinking about.
Right, because guys get deep into the building, whether they should be there or not, and they're smoked out. Because one thing, like, contrary to Chicago fire, when you go into fire, it's black. I mean, it's dark. You
Yeah.
cannot see squat. I mean, the smoke is so nasty, and it's down to the ground. So any working fire, you're not going to be able to see. So to get out, to find a door, and then to have a door that you can't navigate because it's been monkeyed with, yeah, you're in deep doo doo.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, don't do it.
And obviously within the interior, right? So for me, at first, I only noticed like the fire extinguishers, and then now you got lights, you got exit lights, um, a lot of signage, right? So during a fire inspection, obviously a fire inspector is going to come in. They're going to make sure that you have an appropriate amount of fire extinguishers, that they obviously probably still work, that your lights work. What else am I missing here?
So those are great things. Those are important. But I'm trying to think of, because there's the business owners are responsible for a certain those things. The business owner is responsible to maintain their space. A lot of time, the building owner is going to be responsible for the fire systems, and what that is, your fire system is going to be your sprinkler and your alarm system. So those are kind of. Do you want me to touch on those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the the alarm system is going to be a notification. You're either going to be a smoke or heat detectors, most likely, and those are going to be throughout the building. Those are going to be designed by a fire engineer. Those will be installed. That's going to be either smoke is going to send it off, or if there's going to be a certain temperature. And then your sprinkler, if you do have a sprinkler system, is going to be there for the most part. They're little glass bulbs that are in it in the sprinkler head. They have liquid in them. You can look at them, and they're all different depending on temperature. So it depends on if you're in an office versus an industrial manufacturing. You're going to want or higher heat, right? So once those little bulbs get heated, the liquid boils, expands, and pops it. It breaks, the glass breaks, which then that essentially was a plug, and then your sprinkler is going to then vent any evacuate any air in there, and then the water is going to come. So it'll come at that sprinkler head. So contrary to like a deluge system where everything goes all at once, like in the movies, it's going to be contained to that spot where it gets heated up and that head breaks. So the number one thing I'd say about that is make sure that your fire systems are maintained annually, which means you have somebody who puts a tag on there and says, "Yep, we inspected this. It's good to go." And you have somebody that you can trust that is on speed dial if there's any issues with it, if it's beeping, if it's not communicating, because both those systems will communicate with 911. They'll call with usually a cellular dialer now, and we'll say, "Hey, we've got water flowing or whatever," and then they dispatch the fire department, and then we come. So those are the most important, the fire systems, because those are what are going to protect your building life safety. And your depends on your lease or who the ownership structure, who's going to be responsible. But you're right, you have extinguishers, 75 feet of travel from wherever you're at. Make sure those are maintained, and just make them idiot proof. Put them on paths of travel. I like them near doors because people can make a decision. They can go to the door, they can grab that extinguisher, go back and deal with it, or they can just leave. You never want to put an extinguisher deeper into a building where somebody goes and then gets in trouble, because there's cases of that where people go in to get the extinguisher, get overcome by smoke, and that smoke will put you down like that. And then you're right, exit signs have a lot of times have just the light, but they also have a little button on the bottom. You push it, and then the little spotlights will come on, which is supposed to provide at least 2 hours of battery backup during an earthquake or whatever if you lose power, so people can exit the building. And those are little batteries, and you can test them by holding the little button. It's kind of the tip of the iceberg, but you kind of get the idea.
So, different buildings obviously have different requirements. Now, obviously, I'm talking about retail. I'm talking about office. I'm talking about industrial. Your three main asset classes, right? But outside of even that, there are some spaces that require sprinklers based on its size. And I'm once again, I'm sure it's different with every jurisdiction, but the kind of the situation that I felt in or fell in was that we have a 10,000 square foot space that wasn't sprinklered in the beginning. I think it's like 10,200, and literally 10,000 is the cutoff. And that space was not sprinklered. Little did I know, I thought everything was fine, right? So when a tenant came in to get their CO, that was an issue. The space wasn't sprinklered, and adding a sprinkler system is pretty fucking expensive. I'm sure it's like, I don't know, 50 grand, maybe 100, right? So, we navigated that by essentially cutting the space in half with roll up doors and whatnot. So, I'm not saying that's a hack or whatever, but it worked for us. So, I guess my question is, Doc, is once again, different sizes matter, but from an asset class perspective, whether it be office, industrial, or retail, what are the different stipulations here that we kind of have to go in? Because we also have really old buildings that we've looked at that don't have a sprinkler system,
Right.
right?
They're grandfathered in until you do a tenant, either a tenant improvement or a capex improvement, where I think the one thing you do is you just ask the questions before you get into it. Is this, if we retro, if we change, how do we, are we going to be required to bring it up to this modern day code? Because I'm not even sure what in Washington State right now, what the size is. Because it used to be 10,000 square feet, but I think it's smaller now. And I'm not even, haven't been retired. I'm a little bit out of that world. But you get an engineer, fire protection engineer on, get them in your, have a relationship with them so you can ask those questions because they're the designers of the system. Biggest thing is comes down to occupancy. Who's in there? How many people are in there? Anything that's going to be a residential, is going to be such a higher level of protection than if you're talking a warehouse. It's because you're trying to, people are sleeping there, right? And that's the biggest deal is if somebody's sleeping there. That's why we don't want people to sleep in commercial occupancies because they're not designed for that, to protect notification protections. So it's just dependent. I think it's whoever your engineer is who designs it, you just go off of that. And if you're going to make changes to it, then ask those questions up front as soon as you can. But yeah, it's a tough one because the code changes. I mean, it feels like it's a bit punitive at times.
So
And
you
the
have
thing,
to pretty much stay up to date with all the codes, wherever the property is.
your fire protection engineer does
Oh,
because
okay.
it's impossible for us to. I mean, unless we're in a day in and day out, we're going to get caught. I mean, at this point, since I've retired, I just honestly plead ignorance to any type of specific code requirement because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take something from the past and apply it to the future, and I'm going to get bit. So I'd much rather say, you know what, I knew at one point what it was. Maybe being a pharmacist, things have changed. For
Oh,
you, what
100%.
exactly? So you kind of what your information is previously is historical data. It doesn't necessarily apply to what's going forward. And you'd better say, is it still this? Yes, it is. Okay, good. But you need to ask.
So it's probably, when we're under due diligence, it's probably best to reach out to the fire safety engineer, and kind of get some of these things answered prior to, right? Versus buying the property and then being in the shitter afterwards.
If you're not changing anything, you're good to go.
Got it.
But if you're going to do a major change, one where it's 10,000, 10 became 10.2, that's just kind of I mean, did you just gain that extra square footage? I mean, it's kind of bonus.
I think it's one of those where the broker slash the owner just didn't measure it correctly and gave us some shitty number, and then come to find out it was actually more, right? I think
Right.
it was one of those.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to navigate.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes you don't ask, don't tell, but if you're going in there and actually making improvements, like getting a CO or something, that might, depends on the jurisdiction too. Some jurisdictions are far more diligent than others. If you're on the West Coast, it's a whole different animal.
Yeah. So I've also learned I have a building in Indianapolis with a tenant who works with aquariums, and they have, obviously, when you look at a fire extinguisher, it's your red cylindrical device that you could use as a weapon or to put out fires, right?
Okay.
So and there's a little tag on this little fire extinguisher that tells you when it was last inspected or when it expires, right? But at this building in Indy, there's a fire extinguisher that was blue slash white. I think it was blue. It was like a light blue color, but it was specific for them because the the shit that comes out of the red one would mess up the aquarium and the pets that are and the fish that are breeding in there. But the blue one was another certain type of chemical or certain type of use where it would not harm those animals. So my question, Doc, is: are there different types of fire extinguishers out here, and which one, I guess, works better for whatever situations? Like kind of
You're
like this one.
great question, but I'm not familiar with that. The blue might have had like an environmental, you know, connotation to it, but your dry chem is your mixed use, ABC, A being like your woods, your paper, your plastic, B being flammable liquids, gasoline, diesel, and C is your energized electrical. So that one is kind of idiot proof. That's the one you're going to see ABC. And unless it's like a gas station where you got a lot of fuel that has a higher requirement, you go with a 10A, 2BC. A and then 2BC. 10 meaning the units of wood, B being your flammable liquid, 2B, and then C meaning you're not going to get shocked if you hit a panel with it. So that's your dry chem. That's the probably the best one. And then they have other ones that are going to be for flammable metals, combustible metals. So there's going to be some niche ones, and that any extinguisher, your fire protection company will also most likely be able to service those on your annual basis. But yeah, it's those are for 95% of the occupancies. Mixed ABC extinguisher will do the trick.
Gotcha. Okay. So I got one for you. So being kind of a developer, when you're developing a building or designing a building, what I guess how does fire prevention kind of go into this? Like with the construction, with obviously the architects, everybody has a piece of the pie here. But when you're actually building this thing and drawing the plans up and whatnot, you kind of have to figure out where the demising walls are, and you got to put all this fire preventive shit in the walls or between the spaces and all that, right? So let's say I'm a brand new wannabe developer and I got to learn about this shit. What do I need to know in order to be just somewhat dangerous or know what the hell I'm talking about?
Yeah, some basic competencies. My specialty is developing is land, is getting land entitled and ready. So I actually haven't built any commercial buildings yet. That's something that'll come later. But in terms of like professionally, it's just the architects are going to work with the fire protection engineer and set your systems up, and then you'll go through the process, just communication with the jurisdiction. They'll approve all your plans and said, yeah, this is where your sprinklers are. There's a difference between a dry and a wet sprinkler. Are you familiar with the differences?
Well, one's water and the other one's like some like flame retardant, right?
So kind of, but the dry system is where you have freezing temperatures. So what it does is you have a clapper valve that will hold the water in a place that's not going to freeze, and then the entire sprinkler system will be air. So it'll be charged and will be held, and they'll have a compressor that'll maintain the air. A wet system will have water to each of the sprinkler heads all the time. So imagine in Cincy, if you had out on a loading dock, you had water to the sprinkler head. What's going to happen to that pipe? It's going to break in half. It's going to split. As soon as that freezes and expands, pop, and then you got water going everywhere, and it's a disaster. So a dry system depends on where it's at. So if you're subject to freezing temperatures at all, you have a dry system. If it's not, then it'll be a wet system. So mainly your warmer climates are going to be the wet system. So to answer your question, I would design the buildings you want and ask the question where the threshold is that you're going to need sprinkler protection. At that point, you bring in the engineer, and they're going to draw it out for you. So you don't really need to know much more than that, other than say, is there anything that I can ask the question? Is there anything I can do like you did? If I had a firewall here and I've got overhead doors on fusible links, which we've talked about fusible links a little bit. It's a piece of it has a piece of metal on it, lead that'll it'll heat, and so that little piece on lead on a I don't know what the ratio is, but it will hold up the whole door. As soon as that heats up, that lead melts, it pops, and the door comes down, which essentially seals the firewall, creates it. So you're able to use both sides of it on a day-to-day basis, but in worst case, when it hits the fan, that will stop and will keep that fire from jumping through, because that firewall will hold it for us. That's what any kind of sheetrock in your home or whatever. It'll hold it for 45 minutes of fire ripping, which is plenty of time for us to come in and deal with it.
Is it some type of specification on these materials, or are they a certain weight, certain thickness, or
For a firewall,
correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So they'll be able to determine like if the thickness of the sheetrock will meet the specifications of a firewall. Or if you're using some kind of masonry, and there again, that's where the fire protection engineer just says, yeah, you can do this or this for that firewall. And do I need a firewall? So the question I'd ask him is, what are the strategies I could use to minimize having to put a sprinkler system in? And in today's new buildings, most of them you're going to probably of any size, like I say, of any. I think that, like I said, in Washington State, the thresholds come under that 10,000, but most likely you're just going to have to bite the bullet and install it. But there's some strategies too that you can do to make it
So you mentioned, the residential side of it is a little bit hairier, right? Or
for
for fire evacuation and stuff like that.
in terms of like, yeah, like a mixed use. Like if you've got retail underneath and you've got an apartment for
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely hotels, 100%.
So if somebody were to develop a mixed-use building, they're probably going through hell, right?
No, you just got to accept it. You just got to
Oh,
say,
okay.
what do I need to do? And it is what it is at that point.
Okay.
Don't
Okay.
if because the minute you think that, you've already kind of it's going to be a pretty rough experience. You just gotta you create your paths of egress, and it's pretty straightforward, honestly. Because once you do one floor and you do the next, as long as you've got exits that are clear and easy to get out, stairwells, you'll have your elevators, but you'll have egress stairwells. It's going to be cookie cutter, boom, 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 boom. They'll be able to design each one, and they're going to be pretty uniform.
Okay. So we got to talk about tech. Has there been? The reason why I bring this up is because a buddy of mine, he he's into the senior assisted senior living, right? So they have a couple properties here in Cincinnati, and they essentially build them brand new from ground up. And what they really have, which was super cool, is you got this hood that if there's a fire, it like just drops this dry chemical and just puts out the fire, kind of like what you were talking about with the dry system. And then their doors, if there is a fire, all the so right now, since you have the elderly within the building, they have a keypad that you have to type in, your code or an RFID where you put your badge in order to go in and out of these exit points, ingress egress points, right? But if there were a fire or some type of emergency situation, the system unlocks by itself, and then now the residents are able to leave the building, the facility. Super cool from what I saw, and the hood included. So obviously, tech is moving towards a spot where things like this become a lot easier. Fire evacuation, what have you. So when people are building new developments, or even just for an investor or property owner to go into a building like this, what types of new technologies should we be on the lookout for to either implement to make our lives easier, or I don't know, be on the lookout for the future?
It's a good question. The hood, the kitchen stuff's pretty cool. I mean, that's going to be in any commercial hood they're going to have where you have a manual lever to have a. It's called a fixed system, so it'll drop, poof, it'll on in the kitchen. There'll always be one. You can ask the employees, and nine out of 10 of them won't know where it is, but you can kind of show them, move some stuff around. Um, so that's good because the grease fires and everything else. And the one thing too, if you do own any kind of a restaurant or whatever, make sure they're cleaning the hoods, because those grease fires are legit. I mean, some of the guys will reach up all the ways they can to their shoulder, and they'll clean it, and everything above that will be left alone. And it just goes like this. It just goes. The grease just closes off, and when that stuff gets going, whoo, yeah, it's a bad scene. It's a bad scene. So make sure those guys they're doing it properly. Have a reputable cleaner. So back to the automatic doors. So like any hotels or anything, you'll see doors in the hallways. They'll be like this, and they'll be open, right? And they're all magnetic. So as soon as the fire alarm goes off, it just goes boom, and it closes. So then what that does, it creates smoke corridors. So any hospital, any kind of a facility, anywhere, hotels, you look and you'll see doors open in the hallways, and realize those are magnet. You can pull them closed, but they will automatically shut. So the whole point is the biggest danger is smoke. Smoke will kill people way before fire is going to kill them. So that's one. Two, like hotels are going to have to where you can't exit a certain way until if a fire alarm, then all the doors unlock. It facilitates people getting out and it facilitates the fire department getting in. Like key cards for hotels getting in exits and like stairwells. You can't get in unless you have a key card. But the minute that a fire alarm goes off, it'll open up so fire guys can advance with hose lines up stairwells. The one you're talking about, a lot of them is for assisted living, like memory assist, so dementia, Alzheimer's patients. And that's a tricky one. They have to get, we have special inspectors who work specifically for facilities. So they're working with it because it's very technical. So if you're doing that, just make sure, and that's a huge liability, is make sure that anytime you're impeding egress, which you are, because they'll wander off and head down the street, that you're doing it correctly. In terms of new tech, that's I'm not even going to touch that one. That's I'd say keep it as simple as possible because the more advanced it is, the more likely it's going to break.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm
kind of the biggest fear, right? You spend all this money on some crazy ass system, and then it shits the bed in 2 years or whatever, and then you're out, I don't know, 50, 100 grand. So I didn't know if there was like just a benefit to upgrading to something a little bit cooler or more tech savvy. I don't know.
you when you get anything like if you're installing a sprinkler alarm system, get at least 3 quotes because I've seen it 3x from one, yeah, like a really wide range because you don't know, and people associate those guys with being fire guys. No, those guys are private. They're civilian and they're running a business.
Yeah,
So make sure you do your background on them. Make sure they're going to be responsive. They have after hours response, all the things that you would want from them.
yeah,
But
okay.
do your due diligence when you build a relationship with a sprinkler and alarm company.
Got it, got it, okay. From the perspective of an investor, landlord slash property owner, what is one thing that they always overlook that could get them in trouble
In terms of fire,
in terms of fire safety? Yeah.
I think it's the big go back to the same one that everybody can get out of that property. There's in Portland, we went through some really tough times. I mean, it's still really rough. I mean,
Okay.
it's changed a lot. The cultures there have changed a lot, and so there's been such an emphasis on security that you're forgetting the safety of people to get out of those buildings. So security can never override safety of people to get out. So wherever you are in that building, say if I need to get out of here, like now, how do I get out and can I get out everywhere? And people will put on the like not an exit on a door and they'll seal it up. I've seen it welded shut. I've seen asphalt pushed up to the bottom of it where you got to
Holy
cut the
shit.
asphalt. It goes on and on and on of stuff that no, I don't want anybody going out that door. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you have an active shooter, you have anything, or you go out and you come into a little fence, you're in a 5 or 10 foot fishbowl that's completely locked, and it's so that would be the thing is make sure that you can get at least 50 feet away from a structure or get to a path of safety no matter where you're at. That's, I mean, nothing else matters than that. I
Yeah.
mean, the building's going to do what the building's going to do, but yeah, you don't want to mess with that. That's huge.
So, how long do these fire extinguishers last? And I guess two, I'm kind of thinking in the tenant's shoes now. What do you do? Like, I guess you have to put in your lease that they have to maintain, a fire inspection every year or maintain their fire extinguishers every year just to make sure that we're, in compliance with fire safety, right?
Well, it should be, yeah, you could, everything in there is their responsibility. So it depends how you build it out. I've never actually stipulated, hey, you have to get a fire inspection annually because in Portland, we'd rotate. You didn't have to do it every year. So it's just too many businesses. But it's one of those things that you can advise them to do it. I mean, how you structure your lease, but the extinguishers get serviced every year. They're supposed to. They have a tag on it. It's not a big deal. They'll reach a certain point where you'll hydrostatically test them, and then the other one they cut them open and make sure, and then you just pretty much you need to shit can them at that point. So even the hydrostatic testing probably, so 5 years you can go with them. But that is the responsibility of the tenant unless you have alternative, lease that you want to be involved. If you have like a obviously multifamily or something, then those are your responsibility because they'll be in the common hallways so that everybody can come out and grab it. There's just a lot of they had a lot of issue with theft of them. So
Wait,
it's
what do they
tricky.
do if they steal them? Are they sniffing this shit or what?
If it's not bolted down, well, even if it's bolted down for that matter, stuff's getting ripped off. So it's tough. It's tough. It's a tough one because the we have high expectations, and then these transients or different folks are just robbing them blind if it's outside. So then you have to kind of try to make concessions with the yeah. It's a tricky one. So one thing I would say is come from a when you have any issue with any municipality, any kind of a code enforcement or whatever, just have a conversation, ask questions. A lot of times it's just education at that point. If you become adversarial, you're not going to win. I mean, let's be honest. It's just going to be a headache. So just ask the questions. Hey, what do I need to do? And oh, this is the tip of the day. Whenever you're asked to do something and you don't really understand it, say, I'm trying to understand this. Can you please show me in the code specifically so I can understand it better? Can you cite it? And that's totally fair. Be like, yeah, that's from, whatever code site it is, whatever state or national code, building or fire, and you can get it documented. And then you can look it up and research it, and then you can digest it. And if they can't provide it, some folks just kind of improvise because they think so. Yeah, no joke. And so, hey, you may feel a certain way, but I need to see some code without saying that, just so I better understand it.
Yeah.
Please cite the code so I can take a look at it and digest it, make a
Yeah,
plan.
I would probably ask him to cite every goddamn code out there.
Then you're gonna have
just,
to
just, just for some light reading.
exactly. You're
Yeah.
good.
But that's all I had for your brother. I can't even think of any other questions about in relation to fire, unless there's something that I'm missing.
No, yeah, no more stories. No more stories.
Yeah.
You better cut that story out. Um, no, it's good. Hey, anybody has any question can call me or email me. I love talking fire safety. It's easy to get your arms around, to think about. Honestly, that's where you're going to be hurt. Is that liability
Oh,
is your biggest
100%.
safety. So, just a couple things. Just say, hey, Michael, is this a good idea? I'd be like, let's talk about it. Let me see some pictures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. Appreciate your time, brother.
All right.
And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.